Anyway, hi, Eliot. Welcome to Truth with Grace.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Okay, so to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So, you were originally a founder. What is templates.com? Tell us more.
So templates.com was late 90s. I wanted to create my own job. So
Mhm,
I started to explore lots of things on internet. And this was like dial-up internet.
mhm,
And I put together in my head a way that I could sell software for a lot more money than it
mhm,
was currently being done in stores like CompUSA and Computer City. You used to have to go to these
mhm,
big kind of warehouse style stores, and there'd be boxes, rows and rows of boxes. And one of those boxes was Microsoft Office templates and all these
mhm,
templates for Office 98 or 97 and front page and things like that. And so I would call the back of the boxes and I'd say, hey, you're currently selling 80,000 templates for 100 bucks. I'll sell them for $1 a piece online and split it with you. And
mhm,
so a lot of people, I wasn't quite, I was a little younger than I am now. Um, and they just kind of said, okay, but I didn't really think it through beyond that. The internet was kind of like this abstract thing that I was playing with and wasn't quite as material or real. But long story short, put together a system where you could buy individual templates online. And then I figured out, okay, I need to create a way for people to find me. So back then it was like Alta Vista powered search pre-Google. So I went to
Wow.
Yahoo and AOL and all these other places, and I realized there's these thing called meta tags that you put into your HTML, and you could increase your ranking. So I did that a little too well, and the reason I'm in venture is I hit kind of this growth vein on the internet,
Mhm,
and I've never forgotten the feeling. I've been chasing it ever since, but it grew really, really fast. And I was in high school at the time, and I had no idea how to build a company or have customer support or an accounting system that would kind of reconcile with the people that I was selling their software. So it grew so fast that it caught me off guard. And long story short, I had to shut it down because I grew too fast. And that is a thing that I then discovered years later. There's an entire profession that helped founders deal with really fast, immediate growth that is kind of unexpected. And that's kind of my mental model on product market fit. So I hit it. It almost toppled me right over. It was really painful. And I then realized all the need for supporting founders at the first stage. So templates.com was my first failure. That's the way I like to think about it.
I feel like that's a huge success when you are early on in your career. It's all about like getting the hit, but like tell us more about like, how does that kind of lead your way into venture? So I saw that you created another job later on called Penny Black Holdings, and then before
Yep.
that you were assistant vice president of Permal Asset Management. Like, can you describe like what were the core lessons from these jobs before starting BOLDstart?
It's interesting how you put labels on things, right? So I had to put labels on things. I started out, graduated college, I had this bug that I had seen internet, I had seen what was possible on internet, and then I graduated and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But a good friend's dad gave me an internship, and that internship happened to be at a firm that he was running that was a large fund of funds. I didn't really do anything at the fund of funds. I was his intern that would literally do everything for him in the office. And as part of that, he would start doing angel investments. We had these founders come into the office. And I was, early 20s, and I was sitting there, and he would just say to me things like, hey, keep an eye on this. Or, hey, can you just make sure that there's documentation around this check that I'm going to write these guys? And I started to do that and formalize, 2005, six. Um, how do you track an angel portfolio? And then I realized that there's an entire community of people out west in SF by you
Mhm.
that were doing this professionally. And that was one of the most exciting moments. I'll never forget it. So I got on a plane. I went out there and I was really lucky to meet some angel investors. And I saw how they were really backing people as opposed to companies.
Mhm.
I met a lot of amazing founders that were on their second, third, fourth, fifth companies, even some on their first. And I realized that there was an entire library of tribal knowledge
Mhm.
that was there and existed, but really wasn't as prominent in New York. You ask my partner Ed, he'll say, "Yeah, well, we were waiting a long time for that to come around because he was in New York, 10 years before I was doing this in '96. I started around '06, and the idea really boiled down to Penny Black and Permal really was kind of my first set of investors that said, "Yep, go find startups, go find people that are starting companies, and then back them." So Permal was the place where I got the first couple checks to go invest. I took those checks. I went out west. I learned a lot about angel investing, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to start a firm that backs people, not existing products." Well, before anybody else will back them, because around the same time, Amazon was coming out with EC2, costs of startups were dropping, and founders really only needed $1 million to get going to launch their app.
Mm.
And that's right around the time I met Ed. We met, it was a November, it was around this time in New York. It was cold, and we met in the Citicorp building, and he had an existing thesis on the same thing. And it was a meeting of the minds. And we said, okay, well, if seed really does become a thing, then I think that we should run an experiment to really see, what the cadence was like, get to know each other, all that other stuff. And he agreed. And we started BOLDstart 1 in 2010, doing a lot of that, angel-like investing, but we treated it like we were running a much bigger fund. We would write memos, and we'd be real serious. And we really tried to hone and get a good feeling for our swim lane. And we're
Mhm.
still doing the exact same thing today. The market has matured, BOLDstart has matured, but fundamentally, it's the same thing I was trying to figure out back then, which is people start companies, people hire people, people build products, people make decisions. So it's all about filtering for people and then getting on board and helping them out. So I can pause there, but if that answers your question, it was basically a twisted kind of 20 road to get to BOLDstart.
For sure. Hi, Yusuf. Want us to have the audience. So I wonder when you're thinking about so I listened to this interview you've done like 4 years ago. So like you were saying, Reportive was like maybe the first joint investment you've done with
Yeah.
Ed. Like, you were doing a lot of research, and then he would just call the potential customer, or like potential collaborators, and then get like an answer within like a 6 seconds.
Oh, you pick
Um,
up the phone. That was Ed's style that I
right.
really liked. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, so like what was the kind of like early stage look like building a firm, and then who was in charge of like fundraising, who was in charge of doing diligence, and like what were kind of like the original setup, and how do you kind of like trust another person with like, building a firm, because I feel like that's like a really big thing.
It's a very intuitive, great question. I think number one, I give Ed a lot more credit than I would give myself because I had a lot less to lose at that time. He had a mortgage and like kids,
Mhm,
and he was coming out running a much bigger fund,
mhm,
and yeah, I was much younger. And I think the way we approached it was really we didn't worry about any of that stuff. Um, I got a lot of the high net worth contacts that I had made,
mhm,
with Penny Black. I used to have to do before BOLDstart. I didn't have a fund. I used to have to
mhm,
raise money for individual companies. So if one company didn't work, I then had to go explain to 20 investors why it
mhm,
didn't work. And I believe VC is a game of making a lot of mistakes and surviving them.
mhm,
Um, and that then informs how you kind of invest going forward. But um, to the question of how do we divvy up responsibilities, it was all hands on deck for everything. And I think a lot of that still exists today because I don't believe that, for you see this in portfolio companies, you start
mhm,
adding process to things. There's a cost benefit. And if you're growing really fast and your team goes from, you know, 30 employees to 75, kind of like Clay this year, you need to start instituting processes to get behind that growth. So all the things I didn't know at the beginning of my career about how to build a company, how to scale it at the right time, not too early, not too late. Same with a VC firm, but you just have to do it much slower. in a lot of ways. So we did everything that didn't scale. We didn't have like a platform person. We didn't have any of these kind of things that exist today because we did everything because we were trying to define the rules of the road for a brand new part of venture, which was being institutionalized from angels into what they called seed back then and what we're now calling inception investing, which is first, not 1.2 years old like pre-seed or 2.7 years old like seed. And I think that over the years we've institutionalized a lot like a company does. But in the beginning, we both raised money. We both dealt with every single portfolio company. We actually had an office. We couldn't afford our own offices because $1 million fund doesn't give you a whole lot of management fees. We didn't take salaries for a long time. And we would sit in these subletted spaces inside our portfolio because what we learned real fast was, hey, startups will grow really fast when they get funded. So maybe when we do the seed, we can kind of like sit with them. And we did that. We actually lived inside of one of our Fund One companies, Divide, which started out as Enterprise Android. And that was a big bet back then because no one knew how big Android was going to be. That was literally the question. And we would live in those companies and just do everything together. So Reportive, I think, was a great first company to diligence with Ed because it was based on a person who was on a mission. And his mission was to make you brilliant at what you do. Email was the vehicle for that mission. And he said, if I can get everyone that does email, which is pretty much everybody, through their inbox faster with more context, I can make them better at what they do. And I don't know, it speaks to a lot of what we do at BOLDstart because we became very close with them through that mission. We learned an important lesson, which was it's very hard to monetize an app that you build inside of Gmail, a free product. So we didn't know that before, but we did after Reportive. And then Superhuman came along. That was his second attempt at the same mission. And he said, okay, this time I want to build the whole client. I want to control everything, and it's going to be a premium product. And hence we have Superhuman. So I feel like we both learned all of the things together, and our offices never had walls. I would listen to his phone calls. He would listen to mine. We got really good at compartmentalizing in our own head. But I think that there's an element of living inside portfolio companies that all VCs should do because there's an empathy that you build and an interface that you can develop with founders that just get things done faster. You can get to the most important thing faster.
For sure. I wonder, so like one thing you mentioned were really interesting is like, back in time, seed was like the new thing, but what is the new thing now? Also, hi, Ed.
Hi,
So
Ed.
just wanted to say hi. Anyway, so how do you guys think about like, what is a new seed basically?
We call it inception. We're always trying to eliminate ambiguity. So when we started out, it was called seed, and that was new. And then I think somewhere, 4 or 5 years into the journey, pre-seed came out. And Ed and I kind of looked at each other and thought, it doesn't make much sense. And I get it. I do. It's been an ongoing debate for more than a decade. But we immediately went and registered firstcheck.vc, again, to just clarify that ambiguity. And I think recently, we've been calling it inception investing because it truly does talk about what we do. And if you have an idea, similar to the way in 2010, if you have an idea and you've got a really, interesting opinion that will solve a problem space, that's what we do. That's what we get fired up about. It's less about kind of the company at that point. It's more about the founder's mission because starting a company is super hard. And the first thing I look for, and I think you'll get a different answer from everybody at BOLDstart on this, but really, it's how much pain are you willing to endure to see your thing come to life? And I've just, at this point, I've been through so many of these hard early starts that become big deals, but everybody told them no for a long time. And even at BOLDstart, we had this issue, which was, hey, you shouldn't take board seats as a seed investor back in the day. Well, we do take board seats. And it's been one of the more valuable positions that we've been able to kind of influence the company in positive ways, do our jobs well. But I'm looking for founders who almost don't listen to that conventional wisdom and are just going to try a bunch of things and learn really fast.
Mhm.
So I think that inception is our learning really fast and trying to get out to the market, that there is a stage before pre-seed, that is simply the stage that we used to call seed.
Mhm.
The money in venture capital has also grown significantly as an asset class. So it's pretty natural that people are going to gravitate towards, where the best returns are, which is first or inception, or, the artist formerly known as seed, as some people might call it. But I think that we call it inception because there's a lot of skills that are needed and support that's needed, that we think are unique at inception.
Mhm. I wonder, so like I think that's really cool that you guys, I know that you guys have like the domain of like first check VC, and I feel like Inception is like
And we have
super hard to,
Inception VC now too.
right.
Yeah.
I feel like Inception, it's like super hard to, I don't think it's super hard. I think it's super hard to do as a fund. I think it's easy as an angel investor, as like you don't really have like a portfolio construction set in place. Like you don't have to worry about like if something just goes down because it's your own money, or like you're not losing a lot of other people's money. But I wonder, how do you think about like portfolio construction, and like when it comes to diligence? Back in time, you guys were, picking up the phone and then calling someone. Or like for you, it's like doing a lot of like diligence as like on the PhD level basically. So I wonder, how do you think about like diligence these days? And from like a customer check perspective, I guess like how much evidence do you have to see for something to like, or like what are the signal that you want to see from maybe other like downstream investors, or from like the customer slash design partners, or can this person recruit, like
Yep.
what would be the comfort level that you will kind of like be comfortable of doing
Okay.
that?
So I think you're asking, how do we kind of back up our decisions?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So, I mean, and I'll address the portfolio construction again. It's literally been learning by doing and then adjusting. So each fund,
Mhm.
I think we had 12 companies in the first fund, which wasn't even a fund. My
Mhm.
LPs now look at me and go, that wasn't really a fund. That was like a test. And we're like, okay. So,
Oh,
but you get,
also another, so sorry, I have another
yeah,
question that I'm about to forget. But like, so how do you get the first LP? Was it from like Penny Black, or like, I mean, you mentioned it's like your friends,
it's just like angel
family, or
investors, people
someone?
that know you, that want to take a bet on you, that aren't really sure what you're doing, but they believe you're going to do great things.
I guess, how did you get that first person? Because I feel like that's probably the hardest.
In BOLDstart's case, it was a personal relationship that we had.
Okay.
And I knew this person extremely well, and I was doing exactly what you know we were doing anyway. So I was making the argument on my end, at least, that we needed a dedicated fund to do this
Mhm.
in the best possible way, instead of these rifle shots.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, the first fund was made up of people that knew Ed and I really well
How
and would
would you
take that.
say? Okay, so how would you suggest like a regular person to go about it? Like these days, like we're not talking about like, um, like we don't need the
Yeah,
particular person's name or something. It's more of like, how do you kind of like build these kind of relationship with the trust and everything?
that's a great question. That was another learning curve of mine. But the way I found best was to get the founders right in front of them. And this is something that's carried us through BOLDstart's history.
Mhm.
I remember bringing in a founder, and they would do the pitching for me in a lot of ways. And they would say, "How do you
Mhm.
know each other?" And say, "Well, Elliot's been here. He's been helping us out." Basically, you got to be friends with these founders, because founders always know first. They're always going to know about the new deal. And
Mhm.
that goes into my kind of the way I think about other VCs too. It's like we're
Mhm.
all about founders, and I implement that in practice in my networking. So I actively audit my calendar to make sure that I am not talking to as many VCs as I am founders, because that will influence your thinking in a lot of
Mhm.
ways.
Oh
And
wow.
so I mean, in a lot of ways, we have to be first. So I don't almost want to rely on other investors' perspective, because a lot of times it's tough to see the future. The founders can see that future, not us. So I actually rely on a lot on them. But I think that similar to if you're starting a company, you're going to go out and angel invest people that are comfortable without the definition of a company, existing, that you will build one.
Mhm.
And that you will make all the right decisions, know what you don't know, figure out, ask the right questions and get to that framing. But I think that for BOLDstart, it was getting enough people on board so we could prove little bits of our strategy over time. So fund one was, can we do this from New York? Which at the time, I think you covered this with Ed in your interview.
Mhm.
It's almost heresy. It's like you're doing,
Mhm.
seed in New York. How do you do that? Things start here in the Valley. So I think that that's evolved over time. But then it was, can we write bigger checks? Can we, in fund two, which was about 16 million, which it was still hard to raise money. It
Mhm.
was still a lot of individuals. Ed calls it
Mhm.
the lots of lunches, which was definitely true. But you get founders in front of the investors and you show them what you see. That's the first thing I can recommend. It's a human business. It's all about people.
Okay, I have so many questions there. So first of all, like when you're building the relationship with the founders, like are those the ones that you already backed or like were they kind of like, I think he's great, but like at this point I don't have the budget to back it. Like showcase that. And like how another question on that is um like, I guess, like, what how do you kind of, like, form that kind of relationship? Because sometimes, like, I feel like as an angel investor, I can only speak for myself, like, you put a tiny check in and then, you keep in touch with the founders newsletter every quarter. That's it. So and then, like, people, you don't hear from people when they're, like, encountering something, or you hear a lot of things about when everything about them. So, like, how do you kind of, like, know when to help, what to do, and like build a relationship and then so they can speak great things about you in front of your LPs. Sorry, just put it.
No, this
I
is
feel
this
like
is all the right. These are all the right questions, Grace. It's I don't know. I like that's the muscle that you have to build, right? And so I think there's only one way to learn to play basketball. You got to pick up the ball, you got to get on the field, and you gotta try and make a basket. You can tell I play a lot of basketball, but it's golf or whatever sport you want to use. Best way to learn is by doing. And I think I'd benefit uh, of Ed having the 10 years on me. So he kind of got me jump started on that day one. And he would be able to walk in our first fund to these founders. And I always remember thinking, wow, he can get to the most important thing really fast. The founder would be like, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great. Be like, yeah, how's that going? And the founder would be like, oh, I'm really worried. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about that. And so I think that a lot of the art form here is to just be able to get to that most important thing really fast with the founders and then help them address it. Because it's all about speed. It's all about how fast you ship, how fast you learn, and then how fast you can apply what you've learned into what you ship again. So it's like this cycle.
Okay,
And
so
that's a lot of what I look for in the founders. I mean, really, if they're thinking in product, you can tell after a while. Like you hang out with enough product people, you can pretty much tell who is a product person and who isn't. You can then figure out how they express that thought. Some people pick up the phone like I do. Some people go to a spreadsheet. Some people write. And some people ship product. They just create a prototype. And I'm looking for that last bit. Do you literally just ship to figure things out?
mhm. um things out. I'm literally typing this down. So I wonder, I know I have like literally memos
This
in my
is
phone.
great. I love
Okay,
this is the way I think.
I'm
So
sorry.
I'm
I have
happy
a
to do it all. Yeah.
question. I have a question about that. So I wonder when you're like figuring out like if they're a product person, but the problem is like I feel like living in Silicon Valley, like everybody is a technical person, high technical mode, great ability to recruit technical people, but like they can't sell. So they have a hard time figuring out what is a product or like what to sell or like the product change every time you see them. Um, like, are they good product people or not? Since like I feel like you also want people to shift fast and then like kind of like find product market fit, blah blah blah. But like the problem is like
Well, it goes
What
back
is
to mission. It goes back to mission. It's a good point. Like, how do you tell? And I mean, I can give you the anecdotes just from the history. I think it's the easiest way to communicate. Like, I remember when Kareem from Clay and his co-founder came in and pitched us. It was 2000, I believe it was late 2016, early 2017. It's online, but
Mhm.
Ed and I looked at each other immediately and said, wow, this is super great. Like, we just, there's an intuitive instinct here, because what they wanted to do was increase the amount of programmers in the world. Now, they had an idea at the time, which was not the idea that got them to where they are today. It was, I'm going to make a developer tool that is going to have live running code behind it. So it's really easy for developers to get up and running with an API as a service. This was right as, Twilio and Stripe were growing really fast, reaching hyperscale. And all of a sudden, everybody was a platform as a service, or even infrastructure as a service. And they thought, well, it could be a great CRM on the backside for these companies that want to sell, developer services. It didn't work. And then they said, well, we built this really powerful tool. Why don't we put an interface on it like spreadsheets? Because it's the most common programming format. A
Mhm.
football coach is a programmer. They use a clipboard as opposed to a terminal. And so it goes back to that mission. So you could ship a bunch of things. Maybe you don't stick with it, but is there an underlying mission that is stitching all of that together for you? That's what I look for. And that's what they had. That's what Rahul had. I know you talked about Alex and Sam at Security Scorecard. They literally had a blueprint that they put down on the table in our office, and they walked us through detail by detail what they thought they needed in the product. And
Mhm.
so, are you intellectually owning all that in your head? Not easy to do. It's a
Mhm.
little painful. So it's kind of the first tell that you can see a founder that has that tenacity.
For sure. Hi, Britton. Wanted to say hi to everyone. So I wonder, I love what you just said, basically thinking in detail. So like I hear about this a lot. I hear about like the people who invest in cruise, and then they were saying like the founder would literally map out like every single detail on like thinking about things in
At an
detail, basically.
obsessive level.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, and I noticed that like some of the founders that you've backed, let's say the Clay founder, or like previously on ads show, like we talk about Sneak, like I think a lot of the founders have great experience back then. So like before they started a company, let's call it like the Clay founder was like the VP of product of the Wall Street Journal, and like just to give the audience a little bit of like the sense. And I wonder, how do you think about like the repeat founders? Obviously they have a lot more like chances of winning just because they have built great things at great places. But when you're thinking about like the founders that are like, this is literally the first product they've built, do you just run away from it, or like how do you kind of like win the deal that when they're
No,
like
I run towards them. I still do, because it's my old muscle. When I started, I had to do a lot of first time
Mhm,
founders. And it wasn't that I thought, well, I'm only going to do, I've actually met some funds that are like, I'm only doing second time founders.
mhm,
And that's cool. But a part of me goes, well, yeah, I'd like that too. If
mhm,
that were possible, that sounds
mhm,
really great. I mean,
mhm,
you learn things and you get faster. And if you come back, a lot of founders, when they kind of exit their first company, good or bad, I look at them and I say, hey, we'll find out if this is your first startup or your last one, because it's just not for some people. The
mhm,
uncertainty of it, the long hours, the obsession that's required. It's just, some people are different. But I think when I meet a first time founder, I just look at, I use that as a data point like anything else to calibrate, does this make sense?
mhm,
Is this person thinking in a way that I can kind of not only understand but get behind? It's a
mhm,
thought process. So you say, I'm a first time founder and I'm raising $25 million for this AI thing. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to say, okay, well, why? And how did you come to that conclusion? Because what I don't know is, I don't have the operating history. I can't look for that operating history to say, can you handle that much money? And am I sure you're not going to prematurely scale the company,
mhm,
into a brick wall? Um, you know, Guy Journey from Sneak, No questions, none. I know exactly what he's, like he's very,
Mhm.
he learned all the lessons to figure all that stuff out on when and how and where. Rahul's another one on his second company. He raised more money, but it took him 2 years to launch that product. And he had to stay disciplined for those 2 years. And that's not easy to do. But I had confidence that he could do it because of the operating experience that we had and what I knew he learned. But I do not shy away from first-time founders. Crew would be a great one. I met Joao, and it was immediately clear to me because he was all focused on product, and he was saying, "I think this could be a company," because it was growing in the open source world really fast. He shipped a framework to get agents, AI agents, to work together as I think an expression of his expertise because he had spent time at Clearbit building the AI infrastructure and engineering. And that is a lot of what we look for. And that's actually what gets me super excited, individually at BOLDstart is those first-time founders, because there is nothing better than watching a first-time founder hit that product market fit for the first time, launch a commercial product and scale a company. I mean, you really got to like that stuff in order to do it as much as we do it. But do I gravitate towards second-time founders? Do they make more sense usually most of the time? Yes, they do. But I think that a lot of the art form here is also mixing that at a portfolio level with first-time founders, because that is just as rewarding with different challenges.
I want to clarify the question. Oh, by the way, hi, Andrew. We're gonna answer your question later. Hi, Philip. Wanted to say hi. Okay, so I
You're
wonder.
getting good. These are the tough questions. Everybody joining now is in good shape.
Oh yeah, thank you. So, hi everyone. Anyway, so like I wonder. So sorry. I want to rephrase the question. It was
Okay,
not about
rephrase.
first. It was not about the first time founder, but it was more about like the experienced people. So let's say like
Okay.
the director of engineering at Clearbit. That's like very different than like you're a PhD from Stanford. So like I wonder how do you think about like the founders past experience, and like obviously we had investors that came on that they only invest in, let's say, the first 20 employee of a company that have a really big exit, call it like sold to over $300 million
Yes,
and
that's
the
common
first
knowledge now. When I
10 companies.
started, it was like
Right.
the secret. Oh, you get the product
Right.
manager from like the big company. Now that's very common knowledge. So yes, but product people or engineering people,
Right.
people that
Okay.
spotted the problem getting to scale. Yes.
Okay.
So the
So
question specifically is make sure I nail it.
yeah, sorry. The question specifically is like, either how do you get in, or like, are they like who are the right people you're looking for? Like, what are the characteristics? And like, obviously there's like a new company graduate every other day. Like, you can't just track everybody who is in everything, and like, or maybe you do track everybody in
Well, maybe
everything.
with AI you can. I don't know.
Or and then
Eventually, yeah.
yeah, but since you guys are like more seasoned and mature to have the brand, but if you're starting out earlier, like who are the right people to track and how do you track them?
Best answer I can give you is in the beginning, I looked for engineers. We back engineers, so
Mhm,
that's number one across the
mhm,
board at BOLDstart. You have to be able to build the thing that you want to kind of show the world, and at least the first version of the thing.
mhm,
Um, Second is, do you understand your user? Do
mhm,
you understand what they want? And how much empathy do you have? How much familiarity do you have with the actual use case? So whether you're building infrastructure or a security company
mhm,
or some sort of new application, you have to understand those users because they need to feel like it was made for them. And then that shipping velocity comes into play, and you get a lot of confidence from think about your favorite products.
mhm,
I currently love this product, granola. It's not a portfolio company. I wish it was, but like I use
mhm,
granola and I get a new update every other day. And that gives me a lot of confidence that they're shipping things that I want. So it's just I start talking about it like I'm doing now because it's so
mhm,
top of mind. But I just look for, can this founder reach users like that? Can they evangelize the best practice that they're creating with their product? And can they then make it better?
mhm,
And really, over time, I think that's the way that you can get to a pull in the market. What I avoid is the founders that like, I'm going to hire a salesperson to go and sell an enterprise my thing. Because in the beginning, you don't really have enough money to sell an enterprise anything. Big company, forget it, right? You need a groundswell of users to suggest that, because if you're at a big company, you have something to lose, and trying a new product is risky. And if it doesn't work, there are consequences. So I think that there's an element here where you need to be able to show everyone a car when they drive a horse and buggy and say, come on, there's a faster way. And then on that population of people, a couple of them are going to say, nah, it's a little risky. Nah, I don't want to do that. Nah, I got my horse and buggy at home. This is fine. I know how to drive it. But then there's that sliver of users that will go, yeah, super cool. I'm going to try it. Even sometimes I even try to say, like, I don't believe it. I'm going to try it just to prove them wrong. Doesn't matter. You just need to get the users into the product and get them to that wow moment and capture that. That's early stage product marketing. If you can get a user to go, wow, this is so crazy because I get through my inbox twice as fast. If you're superhuman, put that on the website. So your users are the earliest marketers that you have. And if you're a company that's doing a big enterprise thing, great. Well, show a demo, even if it's not fully worked out yet, right? Show the interface, show the dashboard. Ed calls it eye candy, which is a great way to describe it. But get their reaction. Be like, wow, if I could do that, it means I, sneak. I mean, if you ask an early developer user what sneak is, I guarantee you it's a different answer than what a security person that then uses sneak is. The developers will tell you something completely different than a security user. I've heard things like, well, it's a way that I can show that my code is good. It's a quality of my work product. It's a productivity tool. I can use the branches to figure out where the dependent libraries are. So in the beginning, he nailed his user and then found his budget. And I think that if you can go that way, it's a pretty tried and true way to build something new, especially if your category is new. You get the users evangelize you into the budget.
I'm into the budget. Sorry. I need to stop taking notes. But anyway, love that. And then also like, hi Ed. I really love that he stayed because I'm like literally scared right now just because I typically don't see who is watching us. So it's scary. But anyway, so please stay. Anyway. It's like
This is me
yeah,
usually doing this to Ed, so it's nice to be on the other side of this.
yeah. I feel like it's very it's threatening in a good way just because I'm like, oh wow, like he's very respectable. So I don't want to say something crazy. But anyway,
Welcome to my world, Grace.
oh God. So by the way, you're very articulate. And I wonder when you're thinking about like the users evangelize your product into a budget, how do you think about the budget? Like, so for example, is a budget supposed to be like millions of dollars from one customer, or like is a budget supposed to be like $12 per seed, and then you're selling to like small to medium sized businesses at the beginning? Like,
It could be
what is the
either. It could be
okay?
either. I mean, you look at Clay, they have 4,000 customers. Most of them are SMBs. And they started out, I mean, just to kind of pick up on that story, they were sitting there and they said, okay, we have this really powerful platform. We put the interface on it that looks like a spreadsheet. And okay, now we need to go find customers. One of the co-founders sat there and started literally enriching his own leads to find customers to do RevOps. And then all of a sudden, the RevOps community really picked it up and it became a best practice. And then they had to figure out, okay, well, what's the sales led motion behind it? How do we build a company around this? That took 5-6 years, by the way. And I think that back to the point on how do we filter, I'm looking for, are you going to stick with it that long? It's really hard to do, right? But once you get that early user traction, it will lead you to the budget. Now, to answer your question on a technical level, there's different types of budget that you can get and different approaches into that budget. The insertion point is the initial use case, but then everybody lands and expands. I'm going to use the word PLG in the kind of context of it was a term that was created to describe user growth that then had to kind of develop this sales motion around it. But you're eventually going to end up going top down no matter what. If you build a venture scale company, you're going to end up top down unless you're like some consumer play. But even then, you're dealing with kind of the way you monetize that. But Clay then figured out, okay, well, RevOps, we've shifted the technical buyer. We've shifted the buyer to a technical one. And we allow go-to-market teams to be more creative with our tool. So what they did was they collapsed the need for other tools because it was so comprehensive and because you could basically build your own go-to-market stack with Clay. That freed up a whole bunch of budget for them at companies. So as they're kind of going into this next phase of their growth, we're able to go in and say, wow, your budget could be a lot more efficient than it is today. And we see that a lot in security. We see that a lot with market cycles, even at a higher level. During ZIRP, I feel like everyone bought everything. And when I say ZIRP, I mean the zero interest rate policy that led to a lot of the dollars coming into venture. So everybody was trying to grow really fast and budgets were bigger. But now we're in a contractionary period. So budgets get smaller and tighter and you have to show ROI much faster. So if you approach it and you're creating a brand new budget like Sneak did, I think you need to have a pretty compelling ROI. So that goes back to the user case. Well, developers are using it, go-to-market people are using it. How do we justify this as a price? So I can go on and on about this. It all connects with each other. But when it comes down to finding your budget, you got to find it, show it's repeatable, and then you've got to figure out how to expand it over time. And there's whole toolboxes of ways to do that. And usually it's a person. For BOLDstart, I'm like, okay, so we need to figure out budget. Let's call the people that have done it. My job is very simple. I boiled it down over coming up on, I don't know, at this point, 15, 16 years into two things, options and leverage. So we just got our first couple of users, really exciting. They're using it a lot. We need to find our budget. I can create options by showing them 3 other customers, 3 other people that they could bring in that have done it. And then that creates leverage. So options create leverage. And if you can get them the right person at the right time to help them with the right thing, you can create a lot of value that way. And for budgeting specifically, enterprises buy things. It's very hard to sell them anything unless you have $50 million or a lot of money in the bank with a sales force and like product marketing and all these things. In the beginning, it's what do they want to buy and how can you convince them this is what they actually want to buy? Users are the easiest way to do that.
How do you think about like the helping part you mentioned about like, find the startup, the right person, right time, helping them at the right thing. How do you do that like in Bach? And since like you guys have invested in a lot of companies since starting, how do you kind of like manage your time on like help who on what at what time on your end? By the way, hi
Well,
Mason. More people joining.
how do we manage? So all the things in the beginning, Ed and I sitting in a room next to each other with no walls. I think that we learned to manage our time really aggressively back then because we did literally all the things. We still do all the things, but on a tactical level, help your portfolio companies interview, bring them a candidate, and then say, hey, this is what a great marketer or a great salesperson or a great, founding engineer might look like. Here are the way, and then help them make the decisions that amalgamate together to make a company, right? So interviewing the candidates that come into your portfolio companies and helping your founders kind of achieve that pattern matching faster and what great looks like faster is a great way to figure out exactly who to call, because my network personally has been enriched by that, because you go in with one person that and you come out with 8. So the math is very simple there. The other way to do it, I think, is hang out with founders that have literally done it. That's what I did. I literally went there. I said, what's your hardest moment when hiring, marketing? And I had a founder look at me and say, well, figuring out the difference between demand gen and product marketing was the first thing. And I've since he pointed that out to me, this was 10 years ago, I've literally seen that same exact pattern play itself out. It's like, I found this great marketing person. Well, they're demand gen. You're going to want to figure out positioning and, how you message the product first to put through those demand gen pipes. So really, again, back to the basketball example, just pick up the ball and literally get in there and then try and find the person who has done this, because they will be able to come in and go, Oh, okay. So I would do it this way. And
Mm,
also, I could talk until I'm blue in the face a lot of times. Founders won't hear me. But if I put another founder that they respect in front of them,
mhm,
that tells them the same thing in usually different ways, it works. So, I joke sometimes and I say I'm kind of like Bill Murray in that movie Groundhog Day,
mhm,
where you live the same day over and over and over again, and you could just see these things coming.
mhm,
So over time, I didn't believe that that could be possible at the beginning of my career.
mhm,
I think that one of the greatest wins that I've realized and now I'm very confident in is that exists.
mm,
You're if you do the one thing over and over and over and over and over, you're going to get much faster and much more intuitive, and you're going to be able to see a lot farther. So I don't know, there's only one way to start that I'm aware of. I haven't found any shortcuts on building that muscle.
mhm,
But if you can increase your, I don't know, daily routine to just have lots of conversations with lots of people, you're going to develop that filter a lot faster.
mm.
Ed and I used to end the day and say, "Does your brain hurt?" Mine too. Okay, and that's how we literally measured good days was did our brains hurt from all the stuff that we did that day? Still do that.
Um, so, can you walk us through like a typical day in your life? So you're sitting in the founder's office, you're chatting with Ed at the end of the day. So what is like the 8
Slack
a.m. to 8
changed
p.m.?
everything on my day to day. So 2016, we were realizing we were always listening to our customers, right? We try and take a lot of our own advice to avoid being hypocritical. It's just
Okay.
my fear is ever being accused of a hypocrite. But um, we would live where they lived, and we tried to kind
Mhm,
of get ourselves into their workflow. And what we
mhm,
realized was all of their workflow was in Slack. And this was before Slack Connect. So we actually knew this other engineer building a tool that connected you into your another workspace without having to create a new workspace. And that's what our founders told us: don't create a new workspace. I'm not switching.
mhm,
So we said, okay, how do we become like this private channel inside of their workspace? And so we did that. And that change, that was the most dramatic change in my workflow, I think, because I checked that in the morning. So the first thing I did was I got up and I checked Slack because the immediate issues were in there. The stuff that needed to be addressed in the closest thing we can get to is synchronous, right? So
Wait, so you're checking like the Slack channel, you're private eyeing the Slack channel of all your portfolio companies or like
oh,
what's
today
happening
this
there?
has now become super mature because it's now
Oh,
a
okay.
feature in Slack. We actually were part of the beta program when they designed Slack Connect. We
Oh,
were one
wow.
of 3 companies that helped them design it because we already built the workflow almost, in an unauthorized way. Because we were connecting with our constituents. Um, so I get up, I check Slack, and I see what's happening at every portfolio company. And sometimes it's, hey, my competitor just got acquired. What does this mean? All the way to, hey, we just launched on Product Hunt. Can you upvote me? So it's the full range of things. But then what I try and do is have enough time where I can get ahead of some things strategically.
Mhm,
And I learned this from Ed. He's super good at kind of segmenting. He's got a lot of discipline when it comes to kind of how he spends his time. I'm a little more chaotic and kind of ad hoc in that
mhm,
way. But what's important is you get ahead of your key portfolio companies as you start to get a sense for what they're going to need. Because when they realize what they need, you want to be able to just deliver a good example on what's going to speed them up. So, for example, I just closed my or 10th customer and founder led sales. Well, it's probably time to start thinking about at least having some conversations every week with a couple of amazing first sales leaders. What do they
mhm,
look like? Do they come in and manage an institute process, or do they sit down and do demos with customers as an individual contributor? So I try and just spend a good amount of time every day getting ahead of those things for my portfolio. Um,
mhm,
and then a lot of it is net new. It's really easy when you get kind of far enough along in venture to rest on your successes or your portfolio companies and get, I call it, comfy in the portfolio.
mhm,
Well, no, you don't want to do that. You want to be refreshing your network. You want to be pushing for new nodes in that network. And the
mhm,
way that I personally do that is I do pitch meetings. you know, I
Mhm.
used to go to these demo days, and I will literally sit there for 8 hours and talk to 50 founders. And to me, that gives me energy. So, for other people, styles are different. But I think that's the way I learn, at least. And you always want to keep your head, like when we invested in
Mhm.
Crew, I didn't know what an AI agent was. I had no idea.
Mhm.
And it was Ellen and I on the phone call with Ralph. But what was so clear was he was literally plugged into an electric wall outlet. He was so charged up by this. He's like, and people are using it for this, and people are using it for this. And I'm like, this is super interesting. But
Mhm.
because we worked with all these automation companies 10 years prior, because we had seen a lot of the AI embedded features coming into our companies like Clay and Superhuman, it made sense. So we basically dived right in. But if you're not doing that at a high velocity level, you're not going to be able to key into the founders at a human, at a people level quickly enough in this market
Mhm.
to win. Now, 10, 15 years ago, yeah, you could sit and think about it for 3 days. I don't think that works anymore because everyone is literally crowded into the earliest stage. So at BOLDstart, we have to rely on our core edge and asset, which is our people filter and muscle for knowing exactly what to look for. But
Mhm.
pitches are key, lots of interactions with lots of people. It's the way that I built it anyway.
I love that. I wonder, so I want to go back to oh, by the way, hi Ad again. So the article everyone should be reading is Slack
Oh yeah,
collaboration.
okay, great. Thanks for the
Um,
backup. This is great. We're citing.
um, so I wonder, how do you think about like, so you mentioned you would go into a demo day and like chat with like 50 founders. What's a CRM you're using and like what were like the question that you'd be asking the 50 founders? Because I feel like those stuff, like I just recently, speaking of demo day, I went to like the 500 startup demo day and it was like very overwhelming in a good way. As like I feel there's a lot of great founders, but the problem is like I already forgot about the second company when the third company pitched me, right? Or
Totally.
like not
I've had friends
pitching,
look
but
at me and go,
I
I
guess
don't know how you do
friendly
that.
speaking.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a weird thing in my brain that I can literally remember.
You remember
Uh,
everything? Or like how do
well,
you
some people read things and then remember everything they read. Some people, my brain works if I'm interfacing with you, like live, like
right,
this.
right.
I,
So
I can usually remember, it just maps to my brain.
oh god. Okay,
Yeah.
so
But I
I don't
don't
know if
need
I
to
create
remember
both
everything.
memory.
All I'm looking for is what do they decide to talk about? What's
Okay.
important to them? Being a really good investor in anything, but specifically venture, because that's what I know, is all about listening really carefully to
I
what people say. And I'm good at that most of the time. Sometimes I'm not that good at it, but I think in order to get a good filter, you really need to be keyed into what someone's saying, how they're saying it. And so it takes a little bit of the edge off if you're doing 50 conversations in a day. What does that
um
founder start with? What sticks out? And I think trusting that is what the decade long arc is. Can you trust your gut?
mhm,
Because that's what that mean. If we get away from that at BOLDstart, I don't know what we're doing
mhm,
because that is our core competency. It's literally been building this one kick 1,000 times. And so trusting your gut on that is super important. And frankly, that's what the founders want anyway. Best founders want somebody that doesn't ask how big their market is.
mhm,
The founders want someone who wants someone to imagine with them how big it could be.
mhm.
And I think
Um,
that's the founder I'm looking for.
I think the major problem is like, okay, so let's say you're at a demo day. Everybody sounds super impressive. Like obviously they put their best foot forward,
Oh, by the way,
like
secret is never do demo days. Always do pitch practice before the demo days.
oh, what is pitch
So
practice?
much fun. Oh, pitch
Um,
practice happens at every accelerator. I've been very involved in many accelerators over the years. And
mhm,
you learn weird things living inside the startup, right? So someone always changes their pitch right before demo day. It's the whole thing, right? And
okay.
that is an interesting data point. But more interestingly is founders practice their pitch just like anyone else.
How
It's
does that
actually a
into
signal that I look for. If you're constantly practicing your pitch and making that kind of messaging better, and I can
mhm.
see it changing in real time, that's a really good signal. So
Really?
the trick is get in there and help the founders before they have to pitch because you're helping them with something that they want to do, right? Don't
Mhm,
make it about best advice I can give the audience today: do not make venture about you.
Mm.
It is not about you. It is about that founder. So you almost have to be selfless in that way. So if you take that map and you go to these demo days, go earlier and help founders refine their pitch to give the best possible presentation and feel good. And then I think it's a lot easier to develop a relationship that way, as opposed to being transactional. So if you can focus on that human before they have their big moment, I don't know, they kind of owe you one.
How do you get into the demo day? Or I mean, like the accelerator pitch practice day, I guess.
Well, the easiest way is to get to know the program and help founders get into that program at the beginning. See, I'm
How
always
founder get in
peering back
the
this
program.
curtain. I'm going, okay, but what's before this? Kind of poke your
Okay.
head around, right? So you look at the process and you go even farther back into that process, because when they come in, if you can help them, if they're a first time founder and maybe they don't have a network, you send that program a couple of great founders, and then you say, hey, can I help you with pitch practice? It's going to help make your demo day product better. And a lot of these folks have organized this into those programs. So it's like investor, meetings before the big demo day.
Mhm.
I figured
Um,
this out because I watched the early YC deals when they first got to the Valley they moved out there from Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then I noticed that some of these deals were getting done 1-2 weeks before demo day. How was that happening?
mhm.
Well, it turns out that the investors go in and they kind of help them refine their pitch as part of the team.
Okay. So I have another question, and I'm sorry, I want to be mindful of your time. I don't know how long you have, but I'm gonna try to wrap up
I can
soon.
go a little
Okay.
bit longer. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for you on, like, let's say the demo day. So I let's say I went to some of the events in SF. Like some of the I feel like the best engineers don't hang out at the demo day. Like they hang out at like these random like tech events, right? Like paper reading somewhere, like let's say like a tier one, like chief product officer of blah 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 is giving a talk somewhere. Like it was like they're hanging out at these things. And then let's say you meet someone that's like a great okay, you got the signal of like, okay, so this team seems like really, really technical oriented, and let's say they graduated from um the tier one AI company slash or like early internship at tier one AI company.
And they already don't
First
have a seed
one,
check in their pocket from a
they
large
well
multi-stage fund.
they
Cool.
they they well
Yeah.
they do technically. Let's say they have like a leading VC put a small check compared to their whole fund into the company. Okay, so those are some signals, but like, what are the questions that you would ask them to be like, okay, I'm comfortable investing in you? Because and then also like, let's say everyone I chat with other founder were saying that like you would never tell a VC that you need money, so everyone's telling you they
Yes.
don't need
Ask for
money.
advice. You usually
No,
get
no, no,
money. If
they
you
didn't
ask
even
for
ask
money,
you
you
for.
get advice.
No, it's like it's a weird thing as like they didn't really even ask you for advice, but they ask you like they're like technically pitching you, but they also tell you they don't need money and like what's the signal they're sending and like what's a how do you turn on like the bullshit detector on like if this thing will actually be a product versus if this thing is just going to be a technical thing until the person figure out something else later. What would be the question you ask a founder if they're building like a really
Oh,
popular
yeah,
AI
really. Okay. So
yeah,
good
yeah.
one. How do you see this playing out? And I used to go through pitch decks back in the day before this was common knowledge. I used to count the question marks. I'd say, interesting. You have no question marks in your deck. So you know everything? Cool. Like, seems kind of crazy, but and then they would say, oh no, here's what I'm trying to figure out. But really I don't know, I look for lab coats, right? Maybe even my favorite profile is the reluctant founder. Even if you want to start a company, act like you don't want to start a company,
Mhm,
because VCs are hammers, right? So if you just make yourself a nail, it makes things a little bit easier for you. But what do I ask those founders? What do you want to prove? What's wrong with the world? And usually they'll tell you, right? And I think
mhm,
that being able to articulate at least the mission, or even better, the need for the solution that they're building. I'm not normally comfortable talking in an abstract because I usually hang out with people that are like, well, what do you mean by that? Right. So I look for an intimate familiarity with pain first and foremost, whether it's as a user, whether it's as an operator like Alex at Security Scorecard, whether it's a mission like Kareem at Clay, whether it's you can see something that no one else can, like Dimitri at Big ID. Dimitri saw, I mean, when he started Big ID, there was like privacy was not really a exciting market for VCs. Yet he went full bore into that market and got up on stage and said, this is a big deal. Well, it turns out that once GDPR came into play and once, the whole Mark Zuckerberg gets up in front of Congress talking about privacy, it just exploded and he started growing really fast. But you need someone that's standing up on the beach with binoculars, screaming at everyone else on that beach, going, there's a big wave coming. And they're all saying, sit down, you're blocking my sunlight. I'm looking for that person who has a unique viewpoint. And they're not afraid to debate it with you. I think in that debate, you can learn a lot about somebody. Do they over debate you? Do they get hung up on one point? I don't know. I can go on and on about this stuff, but it's a lot about just get on the field and play ball because you're going to learn a lot about that sport. And VC is no different than that. You literally have to make a lot of mistakes. I think the first thing Ed told me was, how much money have you lost? He wanted to know if he could trust me because you learn a lot about the business when things don't work out because most startups will not work out. And so I think that at least an acknowledgement of that by the founder that it's risky is also very important.
So let's say if a founder is building in a popular space, let's say it's like checking the code, right? So or like something basically like it's like the founder would tell you, oh, like engineers spend like a quarter of their time checking their code or like 50% of their time checking their code every single day. And then this thing is gonna help you to check code. And then you hear about this from like 10 founders. And I'm not technical, not sure how to differentiate. Like, okay, sure, the problem probably exists, but like the thing is like who
Yeah,
has
no,
better
I get where
stuff?
you're going. If
Yeah.
true, how big is it? So they have an opinion.
Mhm,
And a classic example of this is Google, last search engine into the market
mhm,
back in the day, right? There was
mhm,
total, everybody's like, we need another search engine. Well, one use of their product changed your mind
mhm,
instantly because it was like, wow, these are the best results. It's super fast. It really gave me exactly what, just lights out. But if I get a founder who's like, if true, is there any question how big a deal that is? I love those. That's when I pay attention. It's because you have an opinion that, if true, is going to change the entire calculus of how everyone measures that market. I mean, yeah, Superhuman's a great example of this because
mhm,
everyone said there has never been an email exit. I think it was like a Comply at that point, which was like, not really a venture scale exit. But what Rahul sees is it's an untapped entire TAM because there wasn't a tool for power users of email before he started. And I think that, he designed his product, built the company around that premise that if he could prove that there's a sliver of Gmail users that would pay a premium
mhm.
for the product that and the speed that he was delivering, you could grow the whole pie. So a lot of this is, do you have a market vision
Mhm.
that will be sparked off by your product? A little abstract, but I think what I look for is simple. If true, how big is it?
How do you differentiate? This will be my last real question, and then we'll jump into a 1 minute fire run. But how do you differentiate between like one founder to the rest of the founding squad who is like solving the same problem?
I think that if I were to look at the same problem being solved, I would look for the one that the founder had their opinion matched
Mhm,
what I thought could gain early traction because it's a simple saying, but big things start small.
mhm,
You can go wide in the beginning And a lot of startups
Mhm.
do. I'm seeing, especially in AI right now, they're going to raise 60 million bucks and do everything all at once. Well, if you're the one
Mhm.
in a million founder that can handle, that's really hard to do, insanely hard to do everything all at once, come out of the gate launching a full platform versus an app.
Mm.
Great. If I see that founder, I will be sure to chase them very hard. But most founders aren't like that.
Mm.
And I think that if I look for the one that just can see the first revolution on the bicycle and what it looks like when that first revolution works. It could take you 7 years to figure out that first revolution, but when it works, everything else can flow from there.
Mhm.
I look at startups as really simple. You got pre-fit, post-fit. And pre-fit, you need to be focused on getting that first revolution done, get the product out, really narrow it down, and be ready to scale. And then the way I've seen it play out over and over again is product market fit is when the customers start buying stuff that you have not even built yet. And it comes in a lot faster than you're able to handle.
Mhm.
And that's when you need to scale. And I think that's when some of the best, later stage investors out by you
Mhm.
have honed their craft. And I'm certainly able to do it, but they are best at it. The question is, when do you let them influence your decisions as a founder? Because the number one cause of failure is premature scaling. So how do I differentiate? I look for a founder who's not going to prematurely scale the company, because that's when I get a zero.
Mm.
It is the most common reason that startups fail. They, for one reason or another, think they've got it, and they don't. And they hire and they up their burn and things like that. That's the best answer I can give you without a kind of specific person in front of me. Sometimes I know how the algorithm works. Sometimes I don't, but so far it's worked.
Amazing. Well, Eliot, I want to end with like a quick 1 minute fire round, although I still have like 6,000 questions, but I'll save them for later. What's your favorite book?
Right. Well, my favorite book overall, well, the most recent one was The Power Law. I thought it was the best chronicle of VC kind of in. If you just look at the chapters, it was really great because it was the way I thought about
Mhm.
dissecting the industry when I got in. It was like internet era, and then you had YC come in, and you had seed investing just starting. But I don't know, it gave me kind of comfort that the challenges that we face have been faced since fast growing companies were even a thing.
Mm. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
There's a guy named Jim Pitko. Jim, I met uh, right before I met Ed, about 2006. Jim allowed me to stay with him in SF. He used to live on Mina Street, and he was part of the original folks at Xerox PARC that mapped the web
Mhm.
back in the 90s. And then he was chairman of the IC3 that assigned domain names. But then he started building companies with this guy, Ron Conway.
Mm.
And Jim taught me one very important thing. He's like, the best founders don't need you. So you got to find a way to become valuable to them. And so new VCs that come in, they go, how do you pick them? I'm like, I really don't. They pick me. And you've got to kind of have a toolbox that is good enough for that VC for that founder to look at you as a VC and say, I can leverage that. You can
Mm.
create options for me. You can, you've access to the talent. You can help me with my next round. Whatever it is, it's always different. But
Mhm.
he gave me the construct in my mind that I needed to make sure I had this toolbox that was valuable, because the best founders didn't really need me.
Mm. Love that. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
I don't know. One of the coolest people I have at a dinner party is Kareem from Clay, because he has
Uh,
so many other interests. Like, he makes his own music. He's been, building things, Clay being the most interesting visible thing, but he's a builder. He builds things for fun. So at a dinner party, there's nothing better.
um, where can we find you outside of work?
Outside of work, well, I'm usually running. So that's the way I think, is I kind of just
Mhm.
get out there and run. Um, but I'm in Williamsburg. Come find me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe you will see some of the audience will just start running in the Williamsburg
Yeah, I'm out in Brooklyn, I'm in
run and pitch.
Manhattan, back and forth. I'm on the L train a lot. But outside of work, I'm usually, as much as I can, hanging out with founders, just socially, because they always have the most interesting things to talk about, and I always learn the most.
Love that.
That's me in a
Well,
nutshell.
oh my God. Well, Eliot, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a
Grace,
fun
thanks for having me.
conversation.
Super fun and great questions. I was wondering how we were going to fill the hour, and we've done more than that. So
Oh God. I'll let
appreciate
you
it.
go back to the Thanksgiving dinner. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Let me